The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal cathedral. 47 different species sat in curved rows that rose toward the dome ceiling. Each delegation had their own section with special air, gravity, and temperature controls. The humans sat in the middle rows, looking small compared to the towering hegemony delegates or the floating gas beings from the Nebula Collective. Ambassador Sarah Chen smoothed her simple blue dress and checked her notes one more time. 15 years of meetings had taught her exactly how to sit, how to speak, and how to smile in these chambers. She kept her voice soft and her requests modest. That was how humans survived in galactic politics. "The Council recognizes Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony," announced the speaker, a tall crystalline being whose voice echoed through translation devices. Vextar rose from his seat, his forearms spreading wide. The hegemony species looked like giant mantises crossed with armored knights. Their exoskeletons gleamed with natural metal plating, and their eyes never blinked. Vextar was the largest of his kind that anyone had ever seen. "Fellow beings of the Council," Vextar's voice boomed across the chamber, "we gather today for the Resource Allocation Summit. As always, we must make difficult decisions about who receives what from our shared galactic resources." Chen listened politely, her hands folded in her lap. Captain Marcus Rodriguez sat behind her in his neat military dress uniform. He looked like any other human military attaché, quiet, respectful, and forgettable. Only the small scar above his left eye hinted at his real experience. "The hegemony has prepared a comprehensive analysis of resource efficiency," Vextar continued. "Some species use their allocated materials wisely, others waste them on projects that bring no benefit to the greater galactic community." Chen felt her stomach tighten, but her expression remained calm. She had learned long ago that showing fear or anger in these chambers only made things worse for humanity. In the observer section, Krilth adjusted her compound eyes to focus on the human delegation. The insectoid researcher had spent 5 years studying human behavior patterns. Something about their body language always seemed wrong to her. Humans claimed to be peaceful and cooperative, but their muscle tension and hormone signatures told a different story. "Our analysis shows that certain younger species have been allocated resources far beyond their contribution levels," Vextar announced. "The hegemony proposes reducing allocations to inefficient colonies by 40%. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew he meant the human colonies. Chen stood slowly, waiting for permission to speak. The speaker's crystals chimed softly. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth." "Thank you, honored speaker," Chen said, her voice carrying the gentle tone she had perfected over decades. "The human delegation appreciates the hegemony's thorough analysis. We would humbly request time to review these proposals and perhaps discuss alternative approaches that might better serve the galactic community." Her words were perfect diplomatic language, polite, deferential, and completely non-threatening. Vextar's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Ambassador Chen, your species has had 15 years to prove its worth. The results speak for themselves. If I may," Chen continued, still smiling, "human colonies have maintained peace with all neighboring systems. Our trade relationships have benefited 17 different species. Our research stations have shared their discoveries freely with the Council databases." "Shared discoveries?" Vextar leaned forward. "You mean the basic agricultural improvements and simple manufacturing techniques? These are things our ancestors mastered millennia ago." Chen's smile never wavered, but Rodriguez noticed her left hand close into a fist for just a moment, before relaxing again. Krilth made a note on her datapad. The human ambassador's stress hormones had spiked during that exchange, but her outward behavior showed no change at all. "How did they do that?" "The human colonies also serve as neutral meeting grounds," Chen said. "Our diplomatic facilities have hosted successful negotiations between 12 different species pairs." "Because no one considers you a threat," said Counselor Thex from the Silicon Brotherhood. "It's easy to be neutral when you have no power to influence anything." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Chen nodded as if accepting a compliment. "We have always believed that strength comes from cooperation rather than domination," she replied. "The human philosophy has always been to build up rather than tear down." Behind her, Rodriguez's jaw muscles tightened slightly. He remembered the Outer Rim conflicts before first contact. He remembered what human cooperation looked like when survival was on the line. How refreshing, Vextar said with mock warmth. However, philosophy doesn't mine asteroids or power fusion reactors. The hegemony's proposal stands. Inefficient allocations must be corrected. Chen remained standing. Honored counselor, might I ask what metrics the hegemony used to determine efficiency? Simple mathematics, Ambassador. Resources allocated versus measurable galactic contribution. Your species ranks near the bottom in military strength, technological advancement, and economic influence. I see. Chen's voice remained steady. And how were these measurements taken? From your own reports, naturally. The annual submissions your government provides to this council. Chen nodded slowly. Of course. Our reports have always been completely honest about human capabilities. Something in her tone made Krilth look up sharply. The statement was perfectly polite, but there was something underneath it. Something that made her insectoid instincts twitch with alarm. The hegemony has no doubt about human honesty, Vextar said. It's your effectiveness that concerns us. I understand completely, Chen replied. Would the council consider a compromise? Perhaps a 30% reduction instead of 40%? The mathematics are clear, Ambassador. 40% is the minimum necessary correction. Chen was quiet for several seconds. The chamber waited. Finally, she spoke again. And if the human delegation cannot accept these terms, then perhaps your species needs to reconsider whether council membership is appropriate for your developmental level. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Chen's smile finally began to fade. I see, she said softly. Are there any other delegations who wish to speak on this matter? The chamber remained silent. After 15 years of human politeness and cooperation, no one saw any profit in defending them. Very well, Chen said. The human delegation requests a 12-hour recess to consider the hegemony's proposal. Granted, the speaker announced. The council will reconvene tomorrow at standard galactic noon. As the session ended and delegates began to file out, Krilth watched the human delegation carefully. Ambassador Chen gathered her papers with the same calm efficiency she always showed. Captain Rodriguez stood at attention, his face blank. The other human staff members followed protocol exactly, but Krilth's sensors told a different story. Every human in that delegation was broadcasting stress signals that should have left them trembling with rage or fear. Instead, they walked out of the chamber like nothing had happened. In her research notes that night, Krilth wrote, "Human emotional control appears to be far more advanced than previously documented. Recommend further study of the gap between human internal states and external presentation." She had no idea that her recommendation would soon become the most important research in galactic history. Meanwhile, in their secured quarters, the human delegation held a very different kind of meeting. The polite masks came off, and for the first time in 15 years they began to discuss what would happen when the galaxy finally pushed humanity too far. The vote was 31 in favor, 16 against, with dozens of abstentions. The hegemony's proposal passed easily. Ambassador Chen stood to address the council one final time before the session ended. The human delegation thanks the council for their wisdom in this matter, she said, her voice as calm as always. We will work diligently to implement these new allocation guidelines. Vextar's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. See how simple it can be when everyone knows their place? Chen smiled and nodded. Behind her, Captain Rodriguez made a small note on his datapad. To anyone watching, it looked like routine record-keeping. The message he actually sent through encrypted channels was much shorter. Package confirmed. Initiate contingency protocols. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Chen walked with measured steps toward the human quarters. She maintained perfect diplomatic posture until the secured doors closed behind her delegation.
Only then did her shoulders drop slightly. 12 colonies, said Dr. Patricia Wong, the human science attaché.
12 colonies will become unsustainable with these cuts. 3 of them within 6 months, added Rodriguez grimly. The frontier settlements don't have the infrastructure to survive 40% resource reductions. Chen moved to the secure communication terminal and entered her authorization codes. The connection established, linking them directly to Earth Command. Report, came the familiar voice of Admiral Harrison. The council voted for the hegemony proposal, Chen said simply. Full resource cuts as expected. There was silence on the other end for several seconds. Casualties? Kepler 442b, New Manitoba, and Riverside Station will be evacuated within 6 months. The others will survive, but barely. Copy that. Status of diplomatic protocols? Chen looked around the room at her team. Rodriguez met her eyes and nodded slightly. Diplomatic protocols remain in effect, she said. But we're approaching critical thresholds. Understood. Earth command out. The connection closed, leaving the room in heavy silence. Rodriguez moved to his own terminal and began pulling up files that hadn't been accessed in years. His service record showed 15 years of diplomatic escort duty, but the classified sections told a very different story. Before first contact, Marcus Rodriguez had been Colonel Rodriguez, commanding officer of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. He had led desperate fighting retreats on 12 different worlds. He had watched entire colonies burn while waiting for reinforcements that never came. He had personally killed more sentient beings than most species had even seen. That was before humanity learned there was a galactic community, before they learned the rules of civilized space, before they decided that survival meant playing weak. "Sir," said Lieutenant Chen, no relation to the ambassador, the delegation's communications officer. "Priority message from Kepler 442b. Rodriguez pulled up the transmission. The colony administrator's face appeared on screen, streaked with dirt and exhaustion. "Earth Command, we have a situation. Unknown raiders hit our outer settlement 6 hours ago. Military-grade weapons, coordinated assault. We've lost contact with 3 mining stations and the agricultural complex. Civilian casualties are significant." The transmission cut to static. "When did this come in?" Rodriguez asked. 20 minutes ago, during the council vote." Rodriguez felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen too many wars to believe in coincidence. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Harrison," he ordered. While the connection was established, he turned to Ambassador Chen. "Ma'am, I need to advise you that this changes things." "How many people on Kepler 442b?" she asked. 1.2 million. 300,000 are children under 16. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Rodriguez saw something he hadn't seen in 15 years of working with her. For just an instant, the diplomat disappeared and something much harder looked out of her eyes. "Admiral Harrison on secure line," Lieutenant Chen announced. "Admiral, we have a problem," Rodriguez said without preamble. "Kepler 442b is under attack. Timeline suggests coordination with the council vote. Confirmed, Captain. We're tracking the raiders. They're not showing up in any galactic databases. Unknown species? No, known species using unmarked ships. Someone's using proxies." Rodriguez and Ambassador Chen exchanged glances. Both had suspected this day would come eventually. "What are your orders, sir?" Rodriguez asked. "Request immediate emergency council session. Demand aid under the mutual defense protocols. And if they refuse?" There was a long pause. "Then we implement Protocol 7. The connection ended. Protocol 7 was a designation that hadn't been used in 15 years. It was the plan for what to do when diplomacy failed completely. Ambassador Chen called for an emergency council session within the hour. When the delegates assembled, she presented the situation clearly and calmly. "Fellow council members, human colony Kepler 442b is under attack by unknown raiders. We formally request immediate assistance under Article 12 of the Mutual Defense Accords." Vextar barely looked up from his datapad. "Have you identified the attackers?" "No, honored counselor. They are using unmarked vessels." "Then how can the council respond to an unknown threat? We must study the situation carefully before taking action." "The colony is under active assault," Chen said, her voice still controlled. "Civilians are dying while we speak." "Regrettable," said Counselor Thex. "But the council cannot act on incomplete information. We recommend you submit a formal investigation request. The matter will be reviewed within standard timeframes." "Standard timeframes mean 6 to 8 weeks," Chen replied. "Administrative processes exist for good reasons." "Ambassador." Chen stood quietly for almost 30 seconds. The chamber waited, used to her careful consideration before speaking. "How long to approve emergency aid?" she finally asked. "The usual review process applies," Vextar said dismissively. "Perhaps if your species had maintained proper defense capabilities, emergency aid wouldn't be necessary." "I see. And the Council's position is that Kepler 442b must wait for bureaucratic review while under active attack?" "The Council's position is that proper procedures must be followed." Chen nodded slowly. "Very well. Captain Rodriguez?" Rodriguez stepped forward, his bearing subtly different, straighter, more alert. Anyone who knew military posture would have noticed the change immediately. Yes, ma'am. Prepare emergency communications to Earth Command. Full priority channels. Full priority, ma'am? Rodriguez asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. Full priority. Across the chamber, Krilth watched this exchange with growing confusion. Something fundamental had just changed in the human delegation's body language. The polite deference was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that made her compound eyes track movement the way they did when predators were near. The human delegation thanks the Council for their guidance, Chen said, returning to her seat. We will handle this situation according to proper procedures. But as she sat down, she said one more thing, so quietly that only the closest delegates could hear it. Our procedures. The session ended with standard diplomatic pleasantries. The humans filed out as politely as always. But Krilth's instruments showed something impossible. Every human in that delegation was now broadcasting the biological signatures of apex predators preparing for a hunt. For the first time in her research career, Krilth began to wonder if the humans had been lying about more than just their emotions. The reports from Kepler 442b grew worse by the hour. The raiders had advanced beyond the outer settlements and were now attacking the main colonial city. Emergency transmissions painted a picture of systematic destruction. Power plants targeted first, then communication arrays followed by medical facilities. Ambassador Chen sat in the council chambers, listening to the debate about proper investigative procedures, while knowing that families were dying in real time. The hegemony delegation had successfully blocked every attempt at emergency intervention, citing the need for thorough analysis of the threat. The council must consider the broader implications, Vextar declared during the third hour of debate. Rash action could destabilize the entire sector. Chen rose to address the chamber one final time. Her team had prepared 20 minutes of carefully crafted diplomatic language, appealing to the council's shared values of life and dignity. She had statistics about the children at risk, economic arguments about trade disruption, and legal precedents for emergency action. Honored delegates, she began. The situation on Kepler 442b has deteriorated beyond all acceptable parameters. Military forces are currently engaged in what can only be described as systematic extermination of civilian populations. She continued for exactly 20 minutes, presenting every argument her diplomatic training had taught her to make. She spoke of mutual obligation, of the moral foundations of galactic civilization, of the precedent this would set for future crises. The chamber listened with the polite attention they always showed human presentations. When she finished, Vextar rose to respond. Ambassador Chen, your emotional appeal is understandable but irrelevant. The hegemony's position remains unchanged. Unknown raiders operating in unmarked vessels represent a complex security challenge that requires systematic analysis. The Council cannot risk escalation based on incomplete information. And the civilians currently under attack? Chen asked. Evolution demands that the weak perish. Perhaps humans will learn efficiency from loss. The chamber fell silent. Even delegates who had supported the resource cuts looked uncomfortable with such blunt language. Chen stood motionless for 30 seconds. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable for everyone present. When she finally spoke, her voice was very quiet. Are you certain that's your final position? Completely certain, Vextar replied. Chen nodded once. Very well. She turned slightly toward her delegation. Captain Rodriguez? Rodriguez stepped forward, and something fundamental changed in his bearing. The diplomatic escort disappeared, replaced by something much more dangerous. His shoulders straightened, his stance widened slightly, and his eyes swept the chamber with the calculating gaze of a professional soldier. Yes, ma'am? His voice carried an edge that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Initiate Protocol 7. Copy that, ma'am. Full implementation? Full implementation. Rodriguez touched a control on his comm unit. Across the galaxy, encrypted signals began activating systems that had been dormant for 15 years. Chen turned back to address the council. When she spoke, her voice was still polite, but something fundamental had changed in her tone. The human delegation formally withdraws from the Resource Allocation Treaty, effective immediately. Confused murmurs spread through the chamber. Treaty withdrawals required months of paperwork and review. We further request immediate evacuation. Assistance for all human colonies currently under council. Jurisdiction. Ambassador, the speaker interrupted. Withdrawal procedures require the procedures we filed in secret with the Earth Congressional Archive 15 years ago, Chen said smoothly. Emergency withdrawal protocols that were ratified but never submitted to this council for review. Vextar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. What are you talking about, human? Chen's diplomatic smile was gone. In its place was something much more direct. I'm talking about the fact that humanity joined this council under specific terms. Terms that included provisions for immediate withdrawal if those terms were violated. Impossible. The Human Accession Treaty has no such clauses. The public version doesn't, Chen agreed. The classified addendum does. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Chen waited for quiet before continuing. The human delegation formally requests immediate assistance in evacuating Kepler 442b. This request is made under the Emergency Humanitarian Protocols, Section 7, Subsection 12. Denied, Vextar snapped. The Council will not be manipulated by bureaucratic technicalities. Very well, Chen said calmly. Then we'll handle this ourselves. With what? Vextar's laughter echoed through the chamber. Your 3 patrol ships and 2 cargo haulers? Chen looked directly at him for several seconds before answering. You really haven't been paying attention, have you? She touched her comm unit. Lieutenant, broadcast package 7 to all council monitoring stations. Across the station, alarms began sounding as council sensors detected massive energy signatures appearing throughout local space. The main display activated, showing real-time tactical feeds. Where there had been empty space an hour before, there were now ships. Hundreds of them. Not the small utilitarian vessels the Council associated with humanity, but massive warships bristling with weapon systems that violated 3 separate armament treaties. What is the meaning of this? The speaker demanded. This, Chen said calmly, is what humanity has been building while you weren't paying attention. The tactical display updated as more ships decloaked. Entire battle groups materialized around every major council station. Defense platforms that had been disguised as merchant vessels began broadcasting military identification codes. The evacuation of Kepler 442b will commence in 6 hours, Chen announced. Our forces are already en route. Vextar's forearms gestured wildly. This is an act of war. The Council will not tolerate the Council, Chen interrupted. And for the first time in 15 years, her voice carried real authority. We'll sit down and shut up while we save people you were willing to let die. The chamber fell dead silent. No one had ever spoken to a council session like that. No one had ever dared. Chen looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates who had dismissed humanity for over a decade. For 15 years, we've played by your rules. We've been polite, cooperative, and accommodating. We've accepted insults, unfair treatment, and systematic discrimination because we believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. She paused, letting that sink in. That ends now. Captain Rodriguez stepped up beside her. Ma'am, Fleet Command reports ready for immediate deployment. All Kepler 442b evacuation forces are in position. And the raiders? Admiral Harrison sends his compliments. The raiders won't be a problem much longer. Chen nodded. Thank you, Captain. She turned back to the Council one final time. You wanted to know what humanity is capable of when we stop being polite. You're about to find out. The transmission ended and the chamber sat in stunned silence as the implications began to sink in. Humanity had just declared independence from galactic authority while simultaneously demonstrating the military capability to enforce that independence. Krilth's instruments showed readings she had never seen before. The humans weren't broadcasting stress signals anymore. They were broadcasting something else entirely. They were broadcasting confidence. For the first time in 15 years, humanity had stopped pretending to be weak. Ambassador Chen no longer stood like a diplomat. Her posture was straight, her movements precise, and her voice carried an authority that made the entire council chamber pay attention in a way they never had before. Since this council seems confused about what just happened, she said, let me explain. The massive display screens around the chamber lit up with data streams that made several delegates gasp in shock. Fleet positions, industrial capacity reports, technological specifications, and population figures scrolled past in overwhelming detail. For 15 years, Humanity has submitted reports to this council. Every year we've told you exactly what you wanted to hear. We're small, peaceful, and grateful for your guidance. Chen touched a control, and the displays changed to show comparative analysis charts. Our actual population is 43% higher than reported. Our industrial capacity is roughly 800% above your estimates. Our technological level is, she paused. Well, let's just say your scientists would be very surprised. Vextar rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Lies, no species could hide capabilities of that magnitude. No species ever tried, Chen replied calmly. Because no species ever had to join a galactic community that treated newcomers as servants rather than equals. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward with a data pad. Ma'am, Admiral Harrison reports successful engagement at Kepler 442b. The raiders are withdrawing. Casualties? Minimal, ma'am. The evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule, Chen nodded. Thank you, Captain. She turned back to the stunned council. The raiders your bureaucracy was too slow to address have been neutralized. The evacuation you refused to support is complete. The crisis you declared too complex to understand has been resolved. In 6 hours? Councillor Thex's silicon form flickered with disbelief. In 4 hours and 23 minutes, Rodriguez corrected. We had contingency plans in place. The tactical displays updated again, showing the scope of human military response. Battle groups had appeared at 17 different locations simultaneously. The raiders attacking Kepler 442b had found themselves facing not desperate colonists, but a full naval task force with weapons technology decades ahead of anything in the Council databases. How? The speaker asked. How did you hide fleets of this size? Chen's smile was nothing like the diplomatic expression the Council had grown used to. This smile was sharp, confident, and slightly predatory. We didn't hide them. We built them in plain sight and called them something else. She gestured to the displays. Those mining ships you've been seeing for 15 years? They're actually mobile shipyards. Those research stations we placed in remote systems? Manufacturing facilities. Those merchant vessels that carry trade goods between our colonies? Troop transports and supply ships. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Delegates demanding explanations, accusations of treaty violations, and threats of sanctions. Chen waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Every treaty violation you're about to cite was committed by species in this chamber long before humanity arrived. The hegemony maintains twice the legal limit of military vessels by classifying destroyers as patrol craft. The Silicon Brotherhood operates manufacturing facilities in violation of 4 different environmental accords. The Nebula Collective has been conducting illegal genetic experiments for over 2 centuries. She looked directly at Vextar. The difference is that we were polite enough not to mention it. Your politeness was weakness, Vextar snarled. It still is. Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Our politeness was a choice. We chose to be cooperative because we believed this council represented something worth joining. We chose to appear harmless because we thought it would help build trust. We chose to accept unfair treatment because we hoped patience would lead to respect. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Those choices have been revoked. Rodriguez touched his comm unit again. Ma'am, Fleet Command requests permission to demonstrate defensive capabilities. Granted. The tactical displays shifted to show a different region of space. A small asteroid field near the Council station suddenly erupted in brilliant flashes of light. When the energy dissipated, the asteroids were gone. Not destroyed, simply gone. Converted to constituent atoms by weapon systems that shouldn't have existed. That demonstration used roughly 1% of the firepower currently deployed in this system. Chen said conversationally. We wanted to make sure our position was clear. The chamber was dead silent. Now, Chen continued, let's discuss the new reality. Humanity withdraws from all resource allocation agreements. We will manage our own colonies according to our own standards. We will provide aid to species who treat us as equals and defend ourselves against those who don't. The Council will never accept, Vextar began. The Council, Chen interrupted, will accept whatever we choose to give it. Because the alternative is finding out exactly how much firepower we've been hiding for 15 years. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who were finally beginning to understand the true scope of their mistake. For 15 years, you've asked yourself why humans were so cooperative, so eager to please, so willing to accept whatever treatment you handed out. The answer is simple. We were afraid of this moment. Afraid of what? Asked the speaker. Afraid of what would happen when you finally pushed us far enough to stop caring about your good opinion. Chen moved to the center of the chamber, her voice carrying to every corner. Human civilization survived ice ages, pandemics, world wars, and nuclear weapons before we ever reached the stars. We've faced extinction dozens of times and kept going. We didn't join your council because we needed protection. We joined because we wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves. She gestured to the tactical display, still showing impossible human fleet formations. This is what we were protecting you from. This is what human weakness was holding back. We tried to be the civilization you could accept. Chen's voice hardened. When that failed, we became the civilization you can't ignore. The silence stretched for long seconds before Vextar finally spoke. What do you want? Equal treatment, fair resource allocation, respect for human sovereignty, and an end to the assumption that politeness equals weakness. And if the council refuses, Chen's smile returned sharper than before, then you'll discover why humanity spent 15 years building the largest military force in galactic history while pretending to be harmless farmers and merchants. Captain Rodriguez stepped up beside her. Ma'am, Admiral Harrison reports all human forces are in position and awaiting orders. Tell the Admiral to maintain current readiness levels. I believe the Council needs time to consider our new relationship. Parameters. Chen looked around the chamber one final time. You have 48 hours to decide whether you want humanity as an equal partner or as something else entirely. Choose wisely. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Krilth's instruments registered something she had never documented before: the complete absence of deception signals from any human present. For the first time in 15 years, humanity was being completely honest. The galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The council chamber buzzed with frantic activity for 3 days straight. Emergency sessions, private negotiations, and desperate communications filled every hour as the galactic community struggled to understand their new reality. The Kepler 442b operation had been completed exactly as Ambassador Chen promised. Human forces had eliminated the raiders, evacuated civilians, and established a defensive perimeter around the colony. The entire operation was documented and broadcast to every major news network in the galaxy. What shocked observers wasn't just the efficiency of the response, but the technology involved. Human weapon systems operated on principles that most council scientists didn't recognize. Their ships moved faster than anything in the galactic databases. Their coordination was so precise it seemed impossible without direct neural linking. Councillor Vextar had spent those 3 days trying to organize military resistance to human demands. His efforts had not gone well. Absolutely not, declared General Thakmor of the Hegemony Defense Corps. You want me to attack fleets that just turned an asteroid field into free-floating atoms? With weapons that I can't even identify, let alone counter. They're still just humans, Vextar insisted. One species cannot stand against the combined might of the hegemony. One species just demonstrated the ability to destroy our entire fleet without taking casualties, the general replied bluntly. Sir, I've reviewed the tactical data from Kepler 442b. The humans didn't defeat those raiders. They eliminated them so completely that we can't even identify what ships they were using. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Species after species reached the same conclusion. Humanity had been holding back, and the gap between what they had shown and what they actually possessed was too large to challenge safely. On the 4th day, the council reconvened. Ambassador Chen entered the chamber with the same calm confidence she had shown since dropping the diplomatic mask. Captain Rodriguez walked beside her, no longer pretending to be anything other than a senior military officer. The chamber was fuller than usual. Word had spread through the galactic community, and representatives from dozens of non-council species had requested observer status. Everyone wanted to see how this confrontation would resolve. The council recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth, the speaker announced. Chen rose, but instead of moving to the speaking platform, she remained at her seat. Thank you. The human delegation has reviewed the council's response to our position. We note that several species have requested private meetings to discuss new relationships with humanity. She looked directly at Vextar. We also note that the hegemony has spent the last 4 days attempting to organize Military action against human forces. Vextar's mandibles clicked angrily. The hegemony will not be intimidated by displays of primitive technology. Primitive? Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. Captain Rodriguez, please show Counselor Vextar our primitive technology. Rodriguez touched his comm unit. The main display activated, showing real-time footage from the edge of the hegemony home system. 3 human ships hung in space near the system's outer asteroid belt. They were sleek, predatory-looking vessels that resembled nothing in any galactic database. Those ships appeared 6 hours ago, Rodriguez said conversationally. They've been broadcasting a simple message. Humanity wishes the hegemony people peace and prosperity. This is a courtesy visit. Vextar stared at the display. His home system was 12 light-years away. Human ships had somehow traveled that distance and taken position there without triggering any hegemony early warning. Systems impossible, he whispered. The hegemony's planetary defense network never detected their approach, Rodriguez continued. According to our telemetry, they could have been there for weeks without anyone noticing. Chen stood slowly. Counselor Vextar, your species spent the last 4 days planning an attack on human forces. Our response was to position 3 ships near your homeworld, not to threaten it, but to demonstrate that we could. The chamber was absolutely silent. This is what restraint looks like, Chen said. For 15 years, humanity has exercised restraint on a scale that most species can't even imagine. We've hidden our capabilities, downplayed our achievements, and accepted treatment that should have triggered immediate military response. She gestured to the display showing the ships near hegemony. Space. We did this because we believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. We still believe in it, but we will no longer sacrifice human lives for the comfort of species who mistake kindness for weakness. Vextar slumped in his seat, finally understanding the scope of his miscalculation. What do you want? He asked quietly. Equal treatment, fair representation in council decisions, an end to resource allocations based on perceived weakness rather than actual need. Chen looked around the chamber. The species in this room control trade networks, defensive alliances, and resource distribution that affects billions of sentient beings. Humanity wants to be part of that system as an equal partner, not as a junior member grateful for whatever scraps fall from the table. And if we refuse? Asked Counselor Thex. Chen's smile was cold. Then humanity will create its own networks, alliances, and distribution systems. We'll offer membership to any species interested in actual equality, rather than hierarchical dominance. Given recent events, we expect that membership list to be quite long. The threat was clear. Humanity could offer an alternative to council authority, backed by military technology that made resistance pointless. The council needs time to consider these proposals, the speaker said carefully. The council has had 15 years to consider treating humanity fairly, Chen replied. You have 24 hours to decide whether you want us as partners or competitors. As the session ended, delegates clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about the new reality they faced. Several approached the human delegation directly, requesting private meetings to discuss new relationships. Krilth published her final report on human behavior that evening. Her conclusions were simple. Humanity had spent 15 years demonstrating perfect emotional control while building the most sophisticated military-industrial complex in galactic history. The humans never lied to us, she wrote. They simply let us draw the conclusions we wanted to draw. We saw politeness and assumed weakness. We saw cooperation and assumed submission. We saw restraint and assumed limitation. We were wrong about everything. 6 months later, the council chambers had a different atmosphere entirely. Humanity held full membership status with voting rights proportional to their actual population and industrial capacity. The resource allocation treaty had been completely rewritten with human input. Ambassador Chen still spoke politely, but no one mistook her courtesy for weakness anymore. Captain Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral and commanded the council's new joint defense initiative. The hegemony, after their failed attempt to organize resistance, had quietly requested a formal alliance with humanity. Their request was approved with conditions. You still use diplomacy, Krilth observed during an interview with Ambassador Chen. Of course, Chen replied. Diplomacy is humanity's preferred method of resolving conflicts. It's efficient, cost-effective, and allows all parties to maintain dignity. But now it's backed by the threat of military action. Chen's smile was genuinely warm for the first time in years. All diplomacy is backed by the threat of military action. The difference is that now everyone knows what our military action looks like. She looked out at the council chambers where delegates were engaging in actual negotiations rather than dictating terms to weaker species. We tried to be the civilization you could accept. When that failed, we became the civilization you couldn't ignore. But what we really wanted all along was to be the civilization you could respect. In her final report, Krilth documented the most important lesson learned from humanity's revelation. Never assume that politeness indicates powerlessness. Some species are courteous by choice, not by necessity. The galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their numbers. It was their patience. And the galaxy learned what happened when that patience ran out. The new council chambers bore a small plaque near the entrance, written in 12 different languages. Strength respects strength, but wisdom respects everyone. It was, Ambassador Chen had suggested, something they all should remember.